Hello. I'm Andrew Hamilton, Associate Curator of Arts of the Americas here at the Art Institute of Chicago. I'm so thrilled to welcome you here to the museum tonight. Thank you for coming, and thank you to everyone around the world who will watch this virtually later. We're gathering here on the ancestral homelands of the Council of the Three Fires, the Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi nations. As some of you might know from our galleries, in this area, the Eastern Woodlands, trees like black ash are really important to art making, such as basket making, and indigenous lifeways in this region. So it's really exciting to be able to welcome tonight a Tlingit artist from the Northwest Coast, where trees, specifically red and yellow cedar, play such a central role in the artistic traditions that we'll learn about. One of the great privileges of my job is being able to get to know artists and to learn from them. And I can't tell you how fortunate I feel to be able to introduce you tonight to James Johnson. He's someone whose work excites me in so many ways. He's an award-winning woodcarver and formline painter, and we've had the honor of sharing his lock, or bentwood box, in our recently reinstalled Gallery 264. But he's also someone who's using his art, his career, and his energies to really push preconceptions of what Tlingit art is. Among many topics he'll hopefully discuss tonight, we'll learn about a number of his recent artistic collaborations with major companies that are allowing him to bring Tlingit art to a much broader global public. He's just come from speaking about his work in critical issues around collaborating with members of indigenous communities at the United Nations in Geneva, Switzerland. So we're very fortunate that he can be here with us tonight at the Art Institute. Please welcome me and joining him to and please welcome me. Please join me in welcoming here to Chicago. Thank you.
Wow, incredible. Gunas Chish, thank you. It's an honor and a privilege to be here to speak with you this evening. My first trip to Chicago, and it's been incredible walking around the city and being here at the Art Institute, working alongside Andrew and meeting so many incredible people that make this whole thing work. And so my name is James Johnson. I'm Tlingit Indian, born and raised in Southeast Alaska. I belong to the Daklawadi clan, which is the killer whale clan. My family lineage is from the Hutsnuquan, which is Angoon, Alaska. And I'll introduce you in my Tlingit language now. Anish ka yuhat duasak Tlingit tlena daklawedi ayahat ish Hutsnuquan iasati gunischish. So it's formal when you introduce yourself to speak in your Tlingit language, telling where you're from and where your family lineage comes from. For me, I'm Daklawadi, which is killer whale clan, and my family lineage is from the Hutsnuquan, which is Angoon, Alaska. And my Tlingit name is Anish Ka, which means man who stands alone strong. And that name was given to me by my grandfather, Chief Peter Johnson of Hutsnu. And also, I carry that name. That was also my father's name as well. And he was named by my great-grandfather, Chief Jimmy Johnson of Hutsnu. And that's where my name comes from, James Peter Johnson. I'm a Tlingit artist and carver. And so within the Tlingit culture, there's no word for art in our language. And so everything you see visually and all the pieces you see were completely integrated as part of our culture and our way of life. And the history of our people was an oral history that was passed down from generation to generation. In the art form, told that story and that history of this is who we are and this is where we came from. And traditionally, you're known as a carver for your clan, Atkash Ak. And as a carver, you're really highly regarded amongst your people because it is your role to create these pieces that told the history of our people and the stories that go back thousands of years in Southeast Alaska. And to learn this art form was based under an apprenticeship system where the master carvers of the clan, if a young man showed any kind of talent or interest in the art form, he immediately began apprenticing under the master carvers of his clan, and they were teaching him the foundations of the art form. And it was done by observing, by watching. And so an example would be when the carvers were carving a kutia, a totem pole, the master carver would be on one side and the apprentice would be on the other side, mimicking the cuts that the master was creating. And so this apprenticeship system lasted for thousands of years in Southeast Alaska. And within the art form, there's a lot of rules and guidelines that go along with it. it's a really strict foundation that you have to learn, and it takes years of studying to learn it. But the foundation is formline. And formline is the visual images that you see within the art form, all the shapes, but every line is balanced off of the other line in order for it to be proper, in order for it to be considered good. When I was first learning the art form, I was fortunate. There's a master carver amongst our people. His name's Nathan Jackson. His Tlingit name is Yesh Ledi. And Nathan's one of the greatest all-time Tlingit carvers living right now. He's in his 80s, and he carves out of Saxman, which is just south of Ketchikan, Alaska. And you'll see him in Saxman in his studio swinging ads, standing up on a totem pole, right, in his 80s. But Nathan, he critiqued my work early on when I was first learning the art form, and he was really critical about what I was doing. And there's an incredible show in Alaska that happens every 2 years called Celebration, where it features the top Tlingit, Haida, Tsimshian artists of that time for this juried art show. In 2012, Nathan was the head juror for that show, and he selected one of my masks to be featured in it. And I was so excited, but I'd only been carving for 4 years. And so it's such an honor to be in the show, and I asked Nathan, can you please critique my work and help me? And he said, look, you're good, I see your potential, but the work you're doing right now is garbage. Then proceeded to tell me how bad I was. But he said, learn how to draw a form line. Learn the fundamentals in composition and balance, because the better you are at drawing, the better you are at carving. And so it goes hand in hand within the art form. You cannot carve without having a comprehension of form line. And the terminology for form line was only created in the 1960s. Through colonization of Alaska, indigenous people in Alaska, we lost the terminology that my ancestors used for this art form. And so a University of Washington professor, his name is Bill Holm, studied the northern style work, which is Tlingit, Haida, and Tsimshian art, and he came up with this terminology that we use today for the art form, called ovoid and U form and split U and S form. But we use all those elements in that terminology that was created then to do this, carry forward this art today. But you think about the 1960s, that wasn't really that long ago. And so for this art form too, there's tremendous balance that goes along with it. And there's a professor in Anchorage, Stephen Langdon, who studied Tlingit art and Tlingit culture for 30 years, and he coined the term obligatory reciprocity when speaking about Tlingit art and culture, meaning you cannot take without giving. And the foundation for our cultures are called kuik. Kuik is our potlatch, and kuik means to give. See, our wealth was determined by not how much we can acquire, it was determined by how much we could give away. And so a kuik, our potlatch, was a central nucleus for our culture. That's where you'd see the true intention of the art form on its display. The beautiful masks were brought out, our regalia was worn, songs were sung. Everyone that would attend a kuik would also have to be fed and given a gift. So you'd see the incredible bowls that were carved and the horn spoons were used. The first thing in colonization, what happened was they banned the kuik. You weren't allowed to sing, you weren't allowed to carry forward this culture that had been going on for thousands of years. And so that's part of this process for me as an artist, is picking up these pieces that we have left and carrying it forward. This balance in the stories within the Tlingit culture is told through a number of different things, but there's a really incredible one about Raven, I'll tell you. Raven's a big fixture amongst Tlingit people in our stories. He's also a clan crest in our culture. But before there was light brought into the world was in darkness. And Raven was walking on a beach in southeast Alaska with his friend, the hawk, Shayath. And far off in the distance on an island, he saw a fire burning. And he knew his friend, the hawk, could fly further and longer than he could. So he asked him, will you bring that fire back to me? And Shayath said, yeah, but how am I going to do that? And Raven flew up to a tree and broke a branch off and gave it to Shayath and said, take this branch and dip it in the fire and then bring it back to me. So Shayat took that branch, and at this time he had a really straight, beautiful beak, the hawk did. So he carried that branch out, dipped it in the fire, and started flying back. And as he was flying back, it started burning closer and closer to his beak, and that's what caused the hawk's beak to melt and turn down. So he brought the fire back to Raven and gave it to him and said, "What do you plan on doing with this?" And Raven said, "I'm going to take this fire, which represents spirit, I'm going to put it in all things. I'm going to put it in humans. I'm going to put it in animals. I'm going to put it in the earth." And this goes back to our traditional Tlingit beliefs that we give respect to all things. Everything exists on the same plane because everything is alive and everything contains this spirit. And so this story like this is told through the art form. And this balance, this obligatory reciprocity is maintained in all aspects of Tlingit culture and our way of life. These days, you see how out of balance we are, right? How out of balance we are with each other, the environment. I did a collaboration this last year with Portugal the Man. They're a big music group. And the lead singer, John Gurley, I did the artwork for the collaboration, but the theme was Indigenous knowledge is the way forward. Looking back and understanding our ways, this balance of not always taking. You have to give. That's our kuik. Kuik means to give. And so as a Tlingit artist, these days, what you do is so much bigger than just the visual aesthetics of the art form. In my eyes, in my opinion, it's one of the most beautiful art forms in the world. When you truly understand Northwest Coast art and Tlingit art and look at it, or sculpture, everything was functional too. The pieces you see, the bowls you see are completely black. They're black because they're used for hundreds of years, serving your guests at the potlatch ceremonies. The bentwood boxes were used, Our sacred ceremonial objects is called atu. Atu was only brought out during our potlatch ceremonies, kuik, and then danced in, worn, then put away. And those pieces were passed down from generation to generation. But then when they weren't being used, they're stored in bentwood boxes. And during colonization, thousands upon thousands of our atu left Alaska. It was taken, destroyed. And so as artists today, what you do is so much bigger than just trying to create something that's beautiful. You're carrying along this tradition that goes back thousands of years amongst our people. And that's the weight that I welcome on my shoulders. That's the weight that I welcome with this responsibility as being an artist. It's such a gift to be able to do this art form. The more that I study it, the more I do it, I feel this. It felt like this big thing I couldn't get my arms around. And I've been doing this for 17 years now, and now I have a good grasp on it. But the more pieces that you do and create, especially the traditional work, the discussion is always traditional and contemporary within the art form. Traditional pieces I love doing, pieces that can exist within our culture thousands of years ago. Like the bentwood box that's on display here, that's a traditional piece that can exist within our culture. The bowls can exist within our culture, the mass. But then the contemporary side too, I think as an artist, you could exist in both realms. And I've done that working with the brands, like Lib Tech snowboards and Vans and Volcom, Smartwool, Yeti, Google, all these global brands I work with could push the art form beyond this reach that's far beyond mine and give it this incredible platform to be spread all over the world. And so it's just, again, like with colonization of Alaska, everything that could have been done was done to destroy our culture and our way of life. And so for me, we're picking up these pieces, right? It's like a puzzle that we know is missing pieces. It's not complete, but we're going to put it back together the best way we know how and move forward and carry this culture forward again. And it's not going to happen in one lifetime. It's not going to happen in my lifetime. You look at any of the old work in collections. My ancestors set an incredibly high standard for what we do today. And every artist, Northwest Coast artist, Tlingit artist, will tell you we are not there yet. We have every tool imaginable these days to create the work, but the reason why their art is so much better than ours is because they had this knowledge, this tremendous knowledge that had been passed down from generations. And we lost that with colonization. The first contact with Tlingit people was in the late 1700s. There's a fur trade that happened in Southeast Alaska. We had Russian fur traders coming over, South American fur traders, European fur traders, all coming to Southeast Alaska for sea otter pelts. And they took those pelts to China and sold them for a lot of money, and there's a cycle that happened. But through that contact, our people, we traded for steel. We didn't have a use for gold or silver. We wanted steel. Once we got steel, our tools improved, and the art form took off at this really incredible rate. Monumental Tlingit work was created during this time frame. Not just from the tools, but also the trading made the clans really wealthy, and they could afford to hire artists to create these pieces and commission them to do this work. My all-time favorite artist, his name's Kajistuwak. He was a carver for the Stikine Tlingit in Wrangell in the 1800s, early 1800s, and he's known as the Michelangelo of Tlingit carving. See, once you learn the fundamentals of the art form, you develop a style within it. It's your signature without signing the piece. It's the way you shape a cheek, or the curvature of the nose, or the corners of the mouth. It's your style. And that just comes with years of doing it. But Kajistuwak was on a whole different level back then. And during that time frame, he could afford to be hired from clans to create these works. And his most famous work is in Klukwan, which is north of Haines on the Chilkat River, about 20 miles. Klukwan was one of the most prestigious Tlingit village sites amongst our people. They controlled the trade for the interior. And so the chiefs were wealthy enough to hire these artists to create these works. So they hired Kajistuwak to come create 4 house posts and a full dance screen at the Whale House in Klukwan. And it's still there today. And you could go there and see it. They won't let you take any pictures of it. You could just have to go in and sit there and look at it and admire it. You know, I've been there 3-4 times already to look at it. But these examples and these carvers prospered during that fur trade era. But with all this contact, too, it brought disease to our people. Smallpox wiped out 3/4 of the Northwest Coast population. So I talked about the apprenticeship system, right? How this knowledge was passed down from generation to generation. Artists died without being able to pass on what they knew. So the system got severed during this time frame. By the late 1800s, 1867, Alaska was purchased from Russia. And the indigenous people were completely disregarded in that purchase. The Tlingit said, give us the money. We've been here for thousands of years. And they were disregarded. But when Alaska was purchased, they sent missionaries and government to Alaska to bring order to it. And that's when our way of life was really coming to an end. You were thrown in jail for singing. You were thrown in jail for carving. So much was lost during that time frame. There's a missionary named Sheldon Jackson in Sitka that had the foresight. He saw our culture was dying, and he started collecting objects. He said, I'm not collecting these objects for outsiders. I'm collecting it for the Tlingit people. That way they could see how their ancestors lived and what beautiful art they created, because everything was leaving. And so all these aspects, all these things. Then we learned about the boarding school experience that got pushed into the light most recently. Our ancestors have been talking about that for years. The horror stories that happened from that. That was the final piece. We're going to take your children from you and put them in these institutions and strip them of the culture. My dad went to boarding school. Sorry. When I first got into this, art form. My dad, he passed away like 7 years ago now, but it was funny. He would send me cedar logs. I live in Phoenix, Arizona. And he would send me cedar logs on freight from Alaska all the way to Phoenix. And so like these pallets would show up with a 350-pound, 5-foot tall cedar log just taped to it, right? And so like after like the third one that showed up, when I'd pick it up, the guy asked me, he's like, what do you do? Because you're the only person ever that has had cedar logs shipped from Alaska all the way to Arizona. And I told him I was a carver, and I carved all 3 logs completely. And I have a last quarter that I use as my ads workstation, But without his support, I wouldn't be where I'm at. But because he did go to the boarding school and was stripped of the culture, when I said I want to do this, he welcomed it completely because he knew that's how our people lived traditionally. And he wanted to see me pursue it. And to do this it's difficult. It's hard. It's supposed to be hard. And it's not a hobby. It's not something you do on the weekends. You dedicate your whole life to this and carry it forward. But like I said before, this is a gift. It's such a tremendous gift that my ancestors gave me to do this. So I'm making the absolute most out of it in my lifetime and pushing it as hard as I can through my lifetime. Then it's time carrying it through my life, and you hand it off to the next person. And that's how it's going to work, to bring this back. So, covered kind of a lot of ground with that, and I apologize for getting emotional, but this stuff happens. Artists will tell you too, looking at old work, you get emotional. I've studied to learn this art form. I've studied pieces in museum collections all over the country, and this emotion comes out of you when you see it. I can't tell you how many times I've just met a curator 10 minutes before, and we're down in the basement in a cold place, and they pull out this incredible Tlingit piece, and you feel like crying when you look at it. You realize what it went through, all these things that I just spoke about, and that piece is sitting there. And that emotion comes out, but I think people are looking too for like their purpose in life. What are you meant to do? What are you meant to do every day? And this is exactly what I'm meant to do with my life. Whether I chose to do it or it chose me, I think it chose me to do this. So, thank you. We're going to move on to the discussion with Andrew, but Gunas Chish.
Thank you so much for that. You've spoken so beautifully and eloquently about the loss and the destruction. And I love the analogy that you used of, finding the puzzle pieces and knowing that they're not all there, but assembling them. But you as an artist, you're creating more puzzle pieces. You're adding to that puzzle. And in your work, it's such a privilege for us here at the museum to be able to share it with so many people. But what I love about the work that you're doing is that you're also sharing it with so many people through the kinds of objects that are just reaching global audiences. So I'm wearing your shoes tonight. And when they went online on sale, I went online and made sure that I got them the very first day. And I saved them for today. But I can imagine with all the kinds of issues that you've been talking about, that maybe some people, non-native people, might feel apprehensive about wearing these objects that you're making because they know the cultural importance of them and the history of them. So I wonder, with sort of ideas of cultural appropriation and those being concerns, like what you'd say to especially non-native consumers about your work and embracing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Being an artist for Vans is like a dream come true. It was such an incredible opportunity, but for me, I think I've always focused on just being really, really good at what you do and put out this really positive energy and be open. Then you start attracting these opportunities to you. And as an artist, you have to have the courage to take it and not second guess yourself and trust your ability and say yes. And so with Vans, same scenario. They asked me to be an artist, and it's such an honor and an incredible opportunity. The list of Vans to people to be artists for Vans is huge. And so it wasn't until 2020 that they reached out and said, we want to do your collection now. And we designed it. We spent 2 years designing it, and it came out in 2022. But yeah, it was a chance also for them to showcase Tlingit art and indigenous art correctly. And I kind of led them through that process. I said, you know what, we're going to create this collection. And they gave me full reign of the design for it. They let me, whatever I wanted to do, I was able to do that. But a step further, they allowed me to market it myself. And so they go, we trust that you could do this. And we want you to present it exactly how you'd like to. And with Vans also, we donated a portion of the proceeds back to my tribe in Alaska that funds a program for Native youth. Specifically, it's called Alaska Native Youth Snowsports Program that gets indigenous youth up on our local ski hill to learn how to ski and snowboard, where everything is completely paid for. They have a full day that's funded. And we hosted 4 events last year, and we're going to do 5 this year through the funding from Vans, which is incredible. And so like that give back process actually attracted the United Nations. And Andrew said, you know, I was just in Switzerland last month working with them, and we've been developing guidelines for how indigenous artists can collaborate effectively with these global brands, specifically in fashion. And again, like they use my experiences as a foundation for what a healthy relationship looks like. And so this has all been uncharted territory for indigenous artists, but we're working with the UN. We're creating these proper guidelines where it's healthy and it's done the right way and correctly. And so supporting indigenous artists and supporting the shoes is honoring our culture, and it's honoring the art. And so, again, that support is incredible. And so, like, wearing the shoes, like, you have no problem with it. It's honoring our people and honoring the art form.
And you were sharing earlier the story about Raven, and one of the things I love so much about the shoes, and we were talking about earlier, is the way that the design of the sun is on the shoes, but split across the two left and right shoes. And I love the way that resonates with the way that formline images on the corner of a bentwood box are split across the corner. So there's something that just seems so like the integrity of the formline is there in the shoe in the same way. And that's something that you've spoken really eloquently about, sort of the way in which your work as a Tlingit artist like maintains its integrity across the different kinds of objects you're making. And that in some ways this sort of division between contemporary and traditional is almost sort of like a false dichotomy, because like you're just still creating Tlingit art.
Yeah, with the design, with the shoe, with Tlingit art, you see incredible symmetry within the art form. Everything's balanced on each side. Like the bentwood box that's on display, like the center line is right on the corner. So each side is symmetrical, and you'll see that within the art form. So it made sense when I was doing the shoes. I said, let's treat that like a center line right down the middle of the shoes and have it be symmetrical on each side. And also as something unique. Typically, you're only going to get one collection with Vans in your life. I said I want to make it the most unique and make it stand out from everything. And they're completely on board with this idea of splitting the design up between both pairs of shoes.
And Raven is a theme that you've returned to a number of times in your work. So I know it's also features on the snowboard that you've created. And we're so excited here at the Art Institute to be receiving a gift from James of his recent snowboard that he's created. And I think we have cycling up here in the images, a preliminary rendering of how we're hoping to debut it in the galleries in a couple months. I wonder if you'd want to speak a little bit about your collaboration with Lib Tech and the creation of the snowboards.
Yeah, growing up in Alaska, you grew up in the outdoors, you grew up in the mountains, and so I'm a lifelong snowboarder as well, being active outside. And so, again, like when I talked about these opportunities that present themselves to you, Lib Tech is a global snowboard brand, a brand that I admire greatly, and they reached out to me and said, we'd like you to be an artist for the company. And there's only about 7 artists they work with worldwide, and so it's really an honor to be an artist for Lib Tech. And same scenario with the owner. I have really good, healthy relationships with all the brands that I work with. And Pete Sari is the owner of Lib Tech, and he's really passionate about Northwest Coast art and wants to support it and represent it and have it be shown properly. And so when I design the graphics for the boards, we don't make any changes. What I turn in is what gets put on the board. Then a step further than that, there's a paragraph at the bottom of the snowboard where Pete said, write whatever you want about the piece, about Tlingit art, Tlingit culture, and they never once edited that. And so when the board sold, again, beyond this incredible reach, when it's sold in New Zealand or Japan or Australia, someone could go into a snowboard shop and see the graphic and then read the paragraph and have a really good comprehension of Tlingit culture and art. So that platform is incredible, and it goes out far beyond my reach. But Pete also, we've donated a portion of the proceeds from every board sold back to my tribe in Alaska. We used it for construction of an arts campus in my hometown, Sea Alaska Heritage Institute. This arts campus teaches Tlingit, Haida, Tsimshian people the art form. It teaches them the language. And it opened last year, and I've actually already been up there and taught at the building. So it's really incredible to have these opportunities and have these brands support me as an artist, and step further than that, supporting my people back home.
And I think one of the things that'll be really important for everyone to understand when they see your snowboard in the galleries is that, this isn't just an image that James designed sort of graphically or digitally. It's actually a panel of wood that he carved. And that whole carved wood panel was then photographed and used to create the image that's on the board. So it is a wood carving inside of a board. I don't know if you can share some of your upcoming snowboard projects or wooden carvings that you're thinking about.
Yeah, since I just finished my 6th graphic for Lib Tech, and we're always a year in advance with graphics. But it's kind of grown where the board has gone into museum collections. Like my Vans shoes are in the collection here. I have a snowboard boot with Vans too that came out, and that's at the Rhode Island School of Design, which is wild as well. But these objects are going into collections, and it's incredible to see that. And Lib Tech is so excited to see these things happening. It's the first time ever that their boards are going to be displayed as art in museums. And so I'm really thankful for that. And again, it's like uncharted territory as an artist to have these opportunities. But yeah, all the pieces I create are actually carved or painted. It's not created digitally at all. And so we're going to get the carved panel from that board should be here at the Art Institute as well when everything goes on display.
You have so many opportunities and obviously so much talent. The world's your oyster. There's so many projects and things that you can pursue. How do you make these choices? How do you decide to commit to projects and which ones are right for you and which ones aren't? And the division between sort of creating these pieces like the lock in our collection here or these corporate collaborations.
Yeah, I think you'd be authentic and honest with yourself. And if something doesn't feel right, I immediately just turn it down. And I've turned down a lot of companies, to be honest, that pretty well-known people, just because it doesn't line up with my lifestyle and it doesn't fit with what I'm doing. And I don't find it too difficult to do that. My focus is on creating works, though. My heart is in creating the traditional pieces and carving and sculpting and carrying that forward. But again, like just being honest with yourself and who you are as a person will shine through in those situations.
For those of you who might be interested, James actually did a number of themes for Google. So if you use Google Chrome as a browser, you can actually use James's art as the backdrop for Google search engines. There's some really beautiful pieces there.
Yeah, I did that commission last year with Google, and there's 8 designs for Google Chrome. And so you could load the theme as your browser. And, in the contract, in the bold print, they said your art will be seen by 1 billion people, and they weren't joking, so. So yeah, I'm really thankful for that.
Well, I think we've covered so many topics already here on the stage, but I know that maybe a lot of you in the audience might have questions for James, so maybe we turn it to audience questions. I think we have microphones that are here up at the top.
Yeah, and people can just raise their hands if they have questions.
Do you currently have a mentor, and are you currently a mentor?
Yeah, that's a great question. Tomorrow, we're going to the Field Museum to go through the collection there, and that is my biggest mentor. Those are my biggest teachers, looking at those old pieces. One piece you can learn so much about balance and composition and positive and negative space by looking at one piece. And so that's my standard. That's where I look to. But I'm an instructor also. I teach at the Port Townsend School of Woodworking in Washington State. I teach 3-4 classes a year there. I was just there last week teaching a panel carving class. And that's important too, is passing on that knowledge, on to the next generation. But I'll tell you a story. There's a woman that's taken 6 or 7 of my classes now, and she's Indigenous. And we hold 2 scholarship spots for Indigenous artists in my classes where they could show up and they don't have to pay for it. And she's there because the men in her tribe won't teach her how to carve. So she shows up, and she's actually one of my best carvers now, which is awesome to see her. And she's so happy every time. But, those things are there. Those situations are there. But passing on knowledge that I have onto the next generation is vital. That's important.
Thank you for being here. I appreciate everything that you share, and even hearing the story about your Indigenous culture is very similar to a lot of different Indigenous cultures around the world. So that's great to shine that light and see that there's sometimes those universal messages. I have kind of a fun question. Do you know if your ancestors participated in any kind of fun snow sports? I know that snowboarding is really big for you and folks, that are around right now, but were there fun snow sports that they were doing? Were they snowboarding back in the day? What's up with that?
No, that's a great question. Our culture in Southeast Alaska, you have to think back to that time frame. Everything you did was for your clan. In the summer months, our salmon was our principal food source, and so the Tlingit had to gather enough salmon to survive the winter. And so everything was for the clan, hunting, gathering, creating the art. And not only that, you're trained to become a warrior. From age 7, young Tlingit men would typically leave their mother and father, and he was raised by his mother's brother, his uncle, to become a warrior. And that was really, really strict upbringing. Example, every morning in the Kwan, which is a village site, a yell would go out, and all the young men would have to get up and go to the ocean and sit in the ocean in the freezing water. And it was a competition as who could stand the longest. And that only trained their bodies to be really strong. It trained their mind to be impenetrable, right? And so this upbringing was really, really strict. And so if the young boy had screwed up, they wouldn't punish the boy, they'd punish the uncle and say, you're not raising him right. And so like Tlingit were trained in warfare from a young age. That's when the fur trade happened. When the Russians came over, they took the Aleuts hostage along the Aleutian chain and brought them to Southeast Alaska to hunt sea otters. But then when they got to Southeast Alaska, they saw the Tlingit could not be pushed around. We had been training like this for centuries. And that's part of the art form as well. There's a hide painting, I believe, in here that depicts a lightweight armor piece. And I do, the helmet, I'm sorry. There's a sea lion helmet that I carved that's a war helmet. And so like, as far as like leisure fun, yeah, I mean, you look at the chilkat blankets, for example. I'm familiar with chilkat blankets. Nachin, they're woven out of mountain goat wool. And those, they live up in the mountains. And the dull sheep horns are up in the mountains. And the Tlingit did not have firearms until contact. But all those Nachin blankets and all those objects were created pre-contact. That means they're going up there with a bow and hunting those to get the material to create these pieces. And it was serious when they left. You know, they typically fasted as well. The women, they tied a red sash around their waist, and that showed that their husbands were out hunting. And so this time was not like a leisure, like, you know, let's go have fun kind of thing. It was really, really strict. Really, you had to survive in Alaska and survive the harsh environment up there. Yeah.
I was just wondering, living in Arizona, do you find that the Southwest indigenous art is informing your art at all, or do you try and keep things totally separate and distinct?
Yeah, the art form is completely separate, but the community, there's an incredible native art community in the Southwest, really strong. You know, you have Navajo, Hopi, Dene, Apache, all in the Southwest. And so taking Tlingit art, Northwest Coast art down there, I've had really good opportunities doing what I do because it really stands out. I mean, you have Colorado there, you have Santa Fe, California, all within reach. Leaving Alaska, you know, I wanted to step out of my comfort zone and take Tlingit art to areas it hasn't gone before. And that's what I've been doing. But Alaska is always home. But I do think, you know, if you really want something, you're gonna have to sacrifice something to get that. And that means, you know, for me, leaving home, leaving Alaska, leaving what was comfortable and taking this to new places.
Just as a follow-up to that, I wonder if you could speak a bit about the reception of your art in the Southwest. And I wonder if you've ever considered maybe doing collaborations with artists from the Southwest.
Yeah, I've actually done a few group shows with Southwest artists. We did this really incredible show called Pivot. The focus of it was to inspire Indigenous youth by using a skateboard deck as our medium. And we did our first exhibit in Flagstaff like 5 years ago. And it was so powerful because every artist was incredible in it. And you walk into the exhibit and everyone had the same medium, but everyone was painting their culture on it. So you had all this incredible Indigenous cultures painted on this similar medium. And people realized quickly how powerful it was. So then it started traveling to new places to be shown. And I've had actually these decks go into a number of different museums, collections as well, like the Nerman Museum in Kansas has 2 of my decks. And so the Heard Museum too in Phoenix, I work with them. They're like home base for me, and they just did an exhibit with the decks and the snowboard as well. So that kind of like the strength of that Indigenous community in the Southwest has been really welcoming for me to step in and be a part of it.
Sorry, 'cause I think we were confusion around the microphone. Hi, I'm Carolyn. I can just tell you how much I've enjoyed this. I lived in Seattle for 6 years, and when I saw this was coming up, I grabbed the opportunity, and I'm here with my parents today. One thing I wanted to ask about is I was immersed, I feel like, with Pacific Northwest art all over Seattle when I was living there, and I was frustrated often by not knowing the stories or what the representation was. And I'm just curious, are there books out there, recognizing so much of it's based on oral history of stories that have been passed down? Are there books that are out there or opportunities for us to learn the stories that are behind the representation? Because I think for someone like me, I look at it and I want to know, what's the Raven story that's been told behind the piece? Is that available?
Yeah, no, absolutely. You think of Northwest Coast art, there's all different styles of it. You look at the imagery of it, and you could tell it's Northwest Coast art, but each tribe will have their own style of it, and they'll have their own stories and own language. So Tlingit is the northernmost tribe for Northwest Coast, and below us we have Haida, then Tsimshian, then you get into British Columbia, you have Bella Bella, Bella Coola, Helsik, and you get into further south, you get to Salish and Seattle, and the art form within that transition changes completely. Colors change, stories change. Again, like we all have our own languages, and so like it's really complex. For stories, I work with the Burke Museum pretty often, and they're an incredible resource. But there's a number of different books also that you could pick up if you want to look. An author named Aldona Jonatas. She's written a lot of books about the Tlingit culture and people. She actually has a new book coming out this year. She asked me to be in it, which was an incredible opportunity because I'm such a fan of hers. But you could look at it, and she covers a lot of the Tlingit culture and stories. Anything by Bill Holm also is great. Another book called Transforming Image is beautiful, where it depicts all the bentwood boxes on the Northwest Coast. A lot of the boxes were such heavily patinaed, we can't figure out the design on it, but they figured out in the 1980s with infrared cameras that they could photograph it, and the design completely comes forward, and they documented all the boxes on the Northwest Coast with that, and they break it down by style of tribes. So there's a lot of good resources for sure out there.
Hi. Thank you, James and Andrew. I was just curious, and your answer just now kind of touched on it a little bit too, of my question of just as far as the community doing contemporary Tlingit formline style, if it's the sort of thing where you like know most of the people, or sort of you don't know, like how robust is that community, and to what extent do you interact with other contemporary carvers / artists who are doing similar kinds of work, pushing this traditional medium into kind of a 21st century forms?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, like I said before, you have these two realms, right? Traditional and contemporary. For me, like as far as the art form goes, you never want to jeopardize the integrity of the art form. And when I teach formline, I teach formline that could be carved, because that was the intention of my ancestors, to do this formline that could be carved. And so like the more contemporary work, you get a lot of more whimsical lines, a lot of fine lines around, and I look at that and say, how would you even carve that? And so like for me, that's kind of where I draw that line. And like I spoke about Nathan Jackson before, he won't do a single piece that's not traditional. He has to do work that will fit within our culture 1,000 years ago. But to each his own for the art form. If you want to do purple formline, then go for it. You know, if you want to do formline of Batman and all that, go for it. But that's not for everybody.
James, I have a question about, it's me. You've been hanging out with me all day, but I have a question specifically about your materials and the like carving tools that you use. I'm wondering, when it comes to like the steel that you're using, are you getting that like custom forged in a way that is traditional to your culture? Or like when you need a new carving knife, are you driving down to your local woodcraft and just like picking up a Japanese blade?
No, that's a great question. The wood I use is red and yellow cedar. I get it in BC and also around Washington State and bring it back to my home in Alaska. I told a story. I had a research grant at the Burke Museum last October. A bunch of incredible old growth red cedar popped up online in Seattle, and I visited 2 guys, and I bought everything they had and canceled my flight and rented a car and drove it back to Arizona. And I couldn't see out any window. That's how much wood I had in the car. And so like I'd carve on our traditional carving woods. The tools are no different. There's an incredible company called Kestrel in the San Juan Islands. They've been making traditional Tlingit or Northwest Coast carving tools, crooked knives, for the last 30 years. And so I'll get a blade and from them and make my own handle and customize it to my fitting. But I like using the traditional tools to create the works. When I teach in Port Townsend, everyone shows up with their crooked knife and their ads, and that's what we use. I teach a paddle class where we have a 6-foot tall piece of wood, and we shape it with our ads. It'd take 5 minutes to shape that on the bandsaw, but it's about learning how to use your ads properly and controlling your ads. And so like I like using the traditional tools. Pre-steel, we use bone and shell to create our tools, and I've studied those tools as well. We're probably going to see some at the Field Museum tomorrow. But yeah, tool making, I love looking at really old tools and studying it and seeing the marks, and it goes back a long ways. There's a crooked knife at the Burke Museum I studied last year. There's an inscription on the blade. And I looked it up that you could barely make out some letters, but I looked it up, and he was a pocket knife maker in the 1800s in Boston. And so someone had that pocket knife on them in Alaska and traded it to the Tlingit, and they got it. And of course, our tools are single bevel, meaning the bottom of our tools are flat and the bevel's on top. So they completely flattened the bottom and forged it and bent it into a crooked knife, but it had that inscription. It was a Boston pocket knife originally. So that stuff I'm really interested. I love looking at old tools like that.
One of the observations that I loved that you made earlier today was when you bring wood from British Columbia down to Phoenix with the heat in Phoenix, it's like kiln drying it just by having it in Arizona. But.
Yeah, I mean, my setup, I shape pieces in my garage, and it's midsummer, and it's hot, and that's just how it is. And so, yeah, my wife is funny where she, says, I'm not going to let you in until you get that thing shaped out, And so, like, I'm out there in 115 degrees doing what I do. But, it's like a kiln for sure, where the wood is, all the moisture comes out of it. But that's what you want. You want flawless cedar to carve in. It's not worth it if there's any imperfections in it, and checking or knots. It's not worth my time to put into it. So you want wood that's completely flawless.
I think we have time for one more question.
I think she's had her hand up a couple times. Oh, that was it.
I almost could shout it. I just would love to know, it's beautiful, and I so appreciate everything you said. The Bentwood box, is there a special thing that goes in those boxes?
Yeah. No, Bentwood boxes, again, like one of the most prized pieces Northwest Coast people created, highly prized, and it was incredible skill that they used to construct it. That's out of a single sheet of cedar, and you cut 3 kerf cuts in it, and then steam it and bend it, and the last corner is pegged. And so that's out of a single piece of wood. And then boxes that were typically painted and recessed carved were owned by high-ranking chiefs in the clan. And it was a symbol of wealth as well. During our potlatch or kuik ceremonies, they'd stack all the boxes they owned, and it showed their wealth. But those boxes, too, that were painted and carved were used to store our sacred ceremonial objects called atu. And so, like, those boxes would contain our regalia and our masks and all these things. The boxes that were not painted were used for food storage. We'd store all of our food in bentwood boxes. And they're also, the ones that weren't painted were also used for cooking. Women, they'd fill it with water and then get hot stones from a fire and put it in the bottom of the box, and the water would boil, and they'd cook in it. And so, like, all these uses came from bentwood boxes. And it was also a trade item too. When boxes were traded, trade was a big thing amongst all Northwest Coast people. But they'd load up the canoe with Bentwood boxes with these items, and boxes get traded from Tlingit territory down into Salish, you know. And so stuff was collected in all different places. That's why it's hard to pinpoint exactly where one came from.
Well, thank you, James, for sharing so much about your art and history and culture with us tonight, and just being so so forthcoming and generous with yourself. So thank you, and thank you all for coming. Please join me.
Gunas Chish means thank you. So thank you all for coming here. It's an honor and a privilege to be here and share this with you. So yeah, thank you.